I have been married for 3 years, living with my husband and our kitten Frankie. My mother-in-law is someone who believes that academic background is everything. She took great pride in the fact that her son graduated from a prestigious university. We live in a countryside where there is only one convenience store, so we have a close relationship with our neighbors. During conversations with the neighbors, my mother-in-law would always boast about her son. You can't marry a son like that unless you have an impressive educational background yourself. That's what my mother-in-law believed. And even when we first met during the marriage introduction, she asked me right away, "Which university did you graduate from?" "I graduated from the University of Arizona, you know." And I answered with the name of my university. My mother-in-law made a clearly disapproving face. It seemed she didn't recognize the name. In her mind, a university she didn't recognize equated to a third-rate institution. And I couldn't help but think she considered me a product of such a university. After that, it seemed she had some thoughts regarding academic background. Although she allowed the marriage to happen, she began to bully me in our daily life. Whenever my husband and father-in-law were not around, she would approach me and say, "Oh, why did Austin end up with such a low-educated wife? You can't compare to my highly educated son. You probably forced him into marriage with some unwanted pregnancy or by exploiting his weaknesses. It's pitiful for any child to have a mother like you. It's better not to be born at all." She would utter these words every time we met. Fortunately, we weren't living together at the time, but whenever I had free time, she would come and relentlessly mock me for being less educated before leaving. She seemed satisfied, but the stress caused my hair to turn white, and then my mother-in-law would spread my complaints throughout the neighborhood. She would say things like, "Veronica can't even do basic math and can only say the alphabet of the age." Because of that, it wasn't uncommon for me to be laughed at by the residents near my in-law's house. I thought about retorting many times, but I knew if I did, my mother-in-law would accuse me of assaulting her and spread false rumors to the neighbors. So I endured without telling anyone about the harassment I was facing. One day, after living like that for a while, my in-laws decided to rebuild their house. It seems my father-in-law had developed back problems, so they renovated the house to make it barrier-free. Since we had been taking care of my father-in-law all this time, we decided to cover the expenses as a gesture of gratitude. My mother-in-law suggested throwing a big celebration and inviting the neighbors, and naturally, I ended up being the one responsible for the preparations. "I'll help," my husband offered, but my mother-in-law forcefully took his hand, saying, "Austin, come with me. I want to introduce my highly educated son." "You, with your low education, your only specialty is cooking, so hurry up and get the preparation done." That was her final remark before she left. After that, my mother-in-law was ecstatic. As expected, she started boasting to the gathered people. "My son built this house as well. He's truly filial, an amazing son. I wonder who raised such a child." "All right, it's me, haha." One of the neighborhood ladies expressed envy, which further pleased my mother-in-law, prompting her to continue. On the other hand, As for my daughter-in-law, she is eager to take over this house without contributing a single dollar. She has no intention of giving me a precious grandchild. She is truly a wicked woman. With those words, my mother-in-law directed her spiteful gaze toward me and continued to speak ill of me. Look at this. This is why having an uneducated daughter-in-law is troublesome. She never gives birth to a child, and she's greedy for money. She must be plotting to inherit our assets. Are you adding something suspicious to today's meal? Everyone should avoid eating it. She started to criticize the dish I had prepared. Unfortunately, I didn't add anything suspicious. Besides, mother-in-law, you were devouring my cooking, weren't you? And even if I did add something, you'd probably survive it without a problem. It's not an issue. Well, we can't expect much from Veronica's child. It will have the genes of low education mixed in. She said it in a hushed voice, smirking. She made sure it was out of earshot from my husband and father-in-law. My mother-in-law always harasses me without being caught by others. That aspect of her infuriated me even more. The neighborhood ladies echoed my mother-in-law's sentiments. That's right, they laughed and agreed. When I gave a slight glare at those friends of my mother-in-law, they wickedly averted their gaze. If you feel bad about it, then don't align yourself with her. After all, my mother-in-law is not some powerful figure. Or perhaps she has some leverage over them. While I was contemplating such thoughts, my mother-in-law's insults toward me didn't cease. How long will this kind of life continue? Do I have to endure being bullied by mother-in-law for the rest of my life? For I propose, lost in my thoughts, a few minutes later, I arrived at a certain conclusion. I've had enough of this. I suddenly shouted at my startled mother-in-law and the little kitten Prinky. I'm sorry for scaring you. I'll give you some treat later, okay? To my mother-in-law, I said. You don't like me, do you, mother-in-law? You don't want a child from someone like me with low education, right? And who knows what would happen if I had a child? Would they be abandoned in the mountain? Oh, it's scary, scary. What? I would never do such a thing. Also, mother-in-law, regarding the money I contributed to building this house, I have decided that you will repay me the full amount without fail. I calmly informed my mother-in-law. My sudden words left my mother-in-law flustered. What nonsense are you certainly talking about me? My mother-in-law's voice echoed throughout the house. Her voice caught the attention of my husband and father-in-law, who promptly joined us. Since the people around us were also showing curiosity and staring at us, I decided to thoroughly rebel against my mother-in-law. Perfect. It's a great opportunity to expose her wicked deeds, isn't it? What was that loud noise just now? My husband asked anxiously. Listen, Veronica had the audacity to demand repayment for the money used to build this house, even though she didn't contribute a single dime. Everyone's gaze immediately turned toward me. But, mother-in-law, didn't you say you don't want a child from me? That's right. To our neighbors, right? I asked the neighbor who was nearby. Yes, that's true. She always says that. Yeah, we don't need genes from someone with low education. The neighbor answered, perplexed, but confirming my question. To my surprise, my mother-in-law stood there with her mouth wide open, shocked. She must have thought that these women would never betray her. How pathetic. Why should I silently endure being bullied just because of that? I'm not your stress and relief too. I am not. I turned back to my mother-in-law and said angrily. My husband and father-in-law, upon learning this truth, expressed their astonishment. Are you bullying Veronica? Are you kidding me? My father-in-law approached my mother-in-law, his face turning red. She, being overwhelmed by his unusual anger, tried to argue back. But it's true. Nothing wrong with saying that a child from low-educated Veronica wouldn't amount to anything. Besides, she's just a stay-at-home wife relying on our son. Who does she think she is? I didn't say anything wrong, she shouted, but upon noticing the cold glances from my husband and father-in-law, her face turned pale. Yes, my mother-in-law had always acted like a good mother-in-law in front of my husband and father-in-law. My husband, casting a cold gaze, sighed and said to his mother, Mom, what are you saying? Veronica graduated from Harvard, you know? She's much smarter than me. The room fell silent all at once. Huh? What do you mean? The name of some unknown third-rate university is what Veronica told me before we got married. Mother-in-law was in a panic. However, I did graduate from Harvard University. The name of the unknown third-rate university that my mother-in-law had heard was Cambridge University. It's a globally famous university that even people who aren't familiar with the university would know. After graduating from college, I studied abroad in the UK and completed my master's degree, so that came my highest educational qualification. When my mother-in-law asked me about my alma mater, I simply mentioned the name of the university without thinking too much about it. Little did I expect that she would misunderstand that, subject me to such relentless harassment. If my mother-in-law, who valued educational background and graduated from the University of Arizona, were knowledgeable about universities, she would surely know about Cambridge University, ranked 5th in the world. But due to this misunderstanding, things had escalated to this point. However, I had no intention of correcting her now. I had already decided that I had no intention of maintaining a long-term relationship with such a mother-in-law. Besides, a person's character is not determined by their educational background. My own parents didn't even attend college, yet they are people I greatly respect. That's why I hadn't planned on discussing educational background. But this may have been a good opportunity after all, because my husband got angry with his mother because of my actions. Hey, the fund for this house comes from Veronica's savings, which you belittle. She contributed $100,000. How dare you underestimate her? How dare you underestimate Veronica? A full-time housewife like Veronica can't possibly have that kind of money. Veronica is not a housewife. In fact, she earns several times more than me. What? The mother-in-law exclaimed in surprise. Yes, I support myself through stock trading and make over $1,000 in monthly profit. Of course, I've never told my mother-in-law about it, so it's understandable that she would think that way. The reason I haven't told her is that just like her emphasis on educational background, my mother-in-law loves money. If she found out about my earnings, she would undoubtedly start to demand luxury cars and the latest home appliances. That's why I asked my husband to keep it a secret from his mother. In reality, no matter when she called or suddenly dropped by, She assumed I'm a part-time housewife because I'm always here. Confronted with an unexpected truth, my mother-in-law seemed unable to find any words and remained completely stunned. Now, let me address something that I'm sure many of you are wondering about. It's why I contributed to the house fund for my despised mother-in-law. Normally, one wouldn't want to spend even a single dollar for that. The answer is simple. It was to prevent the topic of living together from coming up. I thought that if I provided a barrier-free, beautiful home, she would stay quiet even if her health deteriorated a bit. Besides, since she would be comfortable in her home, I believed she wouldn't come over frankly in the future. It was an expense for me to live peacefully. Don't you think it's a small price to pay? However, after this incident, I could only perceive my mother-in-law as an enemy. Anyway, you will repay the full $100,000. If you can't, then sell the land and the house. If you don't like that, then borrow money from a financial institution, I stated firmly. You can't be allowed to do that. This house is belong to us now, so I have no intention of giving you even a single dollar. The father-in-law, who had been lost in thought until then, finally yelled at the mother-in-law. How much more do you need to make everyone around you miserable? Look around. Nobody is on your side. The mother-in-law was shouted at by her husband and started crying. Still, no matter how much the father-in-law apologized, the mother-in-law refused to bow her head. She had an extraordinary amount of pride. In the end, the mother-in-law never apologized and left without even looking at me. Veronica, I'm sorry. If only I had been paying attention, this wouldn't have happened. There's no need for my father-in-law to apologize. My mother-in-law only believes me when he's not around. Father-in-law, you've done nothing wrong. Please continue treating me like your own daughter from now on, I said, placing my hand on his shoulder. Thank you, Veronica. Leave it to me. I'll make sure she never bleeds you again. Saying that, my father-in-law followed after my mother-in-law. The people around us seemed relieved now that the situation had settled down. Neighborhood residents came to apologize to me and even declared that they would cut ties with my mother-in-law. My heart felt light and at ease. 1 month later, it seems like my father-in-law has announced a divorce to my mother-in-law. Apparently, it wasn't just about that day. My mother-in-law had been having an affair with a highly educated middle-aged man. My father-in-law, who had suspected something was amiss, secretly hired a private investigator to look into it. The divorce was quickly finalized, and it turns out my mother-in-law has to pay back the $100,000 renovation cost that I had covered. The renovation expenses were reimbursed by her affair partner. In turn, she is currently working as a housekeeper for him. My father-in-law reported this to us with a look of relief. From now on, both my father-in-law and I can live without being troubled by mother-in-law. As for me, I'm now 5 months pregnant, and my husband, father-in-law, and even the neighbors are concerned about my well-being and offer their help. It's a great relief. I can't help but feel a slight sense of gratitude toward my mother-in-law, as it's thanks to her that I've gained so many allies. Looking ahead, I hope to live happily with our soon-to-be born child, my husband, father-in-law, and our cat, Frankie.